Hi, everyone. I'm back with a solo episode today. I feel like I haven't done a solo episode in a minute. I've been so blessed and so lucky to have some amazing guests coming on the podcast, and stay tuned for so many more cool things to happen here. But it's kind of fun just coming back and talking by myself and hopefully helping you guys along the way. The podcast has really been a labor of love, but so much fun. And I'm just so grateful to all of you who are listening and who support the podcast. It just really means the world to me. So I was working on today's episode and I thought to myself, you know what? I was just recently interviewed on another podcast and I was asked, they did these like kind of quick fire questions at the end. And one of them was like, what is the best advice you've ever gotten? And what is the best parenting advice you've ever gotten? And I thought, you know what? I'm going to do an episode where I'm just going to share the three pieces of advice that really stand out to me or that I actually love. And I want to share them with you. And they're not necessarily advice. I struggle with that a little bit because I feel like it changes for me all the time. And sometimes like something really resonates and I get super excited about it. So I want to talk about it. But maybe in a year from now, I will feel completely different about something else. So I guess I should preface it by saying, like, in this very moment, these are three things that are just on my mind that I think are really applicable to parenting, but also life. So that's why I really wanted to share them here. There's a lot of parenting and life that just go hand in hand, right? The way we parent our kids in so many ways has to really be the same way we parent ourselves, how we parent through challenges, how we parent through unknowns, how we face change, right? Parenting really is a process. It isn't a thing. It's not a noun, it's a verb. So let's jump into it. Number one, what is the first thing that really stands out when somebody asks me, what's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten? And it is this, and I wrote an article about it, but it's just the idea of slowing down. I'm somebody who tends to move quickly. I tend to overbook myself. I tend to stay busier than I need to stay. A lot of it is really creating awareness around when that pattern for me is like fill my schedule, and why am I doing it? Like creating some awareness around intentionality and like why am I saying yes to this commitment? Do I really want to do it? So the only way I could really create awareness around any of these practices or these processes was really to start slowing down. And for me, the idea of slowing down almost created a little bit of anxiousness in me because it almost made me sit with some discomfort. It made me sit with the idea of like, well, let me just say yes to this so I don't have to think about hurting the other person if I say no. Or let me just go ahead and do this because it's going to be so much easier if I just do it instead of asking somebody else to do it. And I'll probably do it better anyways. Like we can get really kind of egoic about the reasons that we're saying yes to things. And so slowing down really forced me to look a little bit more at myself. And when those insecurities were getting the best of me, it really forces me to really get quiet and think about what I really want and what I really need, which sometimes we don't do. Sometimes we get so busy caretaking everyone else around us that our yeses always come from a place of serving somebody else, which is good. I mean, it's important. But at the same time, when we don't slow down, we don't have a way of filtering through that process. We don't have a way of asking ourselves what we need, what we want. So slowing down for me has been so incredibly helpful. Also, I will say my productivity has increased weirdly enough. It's not that I need to be doing more, it's that the things I'm doing truly matter to me. They're the things that mean a lot to me. The way I'm investing my time are the things that I love to do. So while slowing down might seem like kind of kicking our legs back and taking a break and, sipping on a margarita on, poolside somewhere, which by the way isn't a bad thing either. For me, slowing down is really more of a process of just being able to take a deep breath, kind of lock in, sit with something, let it kind of go through my body and decide, do I like the way that feels? Does this feel like a yes to me, or is there some resistance here? If there's some resistance, then I'm going to really stop and think about what is it? Because there's healthy resistance, and then there's actually like, no, your body and your mind and your spirit are telling you this is a no. So the only way we can really tap into that kind of a process, that kind of awareness, that kind of attunement is what I call it for myself, is by slowing down. So slowing down single-handedly is one of my favorite pieces of advice. It's also the one thing that's really impacted me in the most positive way. I can tell you the last couple of years, since COVID, I would describe it, since probably that moment, I've really been taking moments to slow down. And in parenting, it's so critical. Sometimes we're so quick to react to our kids. And 9 out of 10 times, those quick reactions, those fast kind of sarcastic remarks or when we snap at them about something or when we're overwhelmed, if we just slow down, I promise you the outcome would be so different. Often when we snap or when we react really quickly, it doesn't generally yield the outcome we want. It's coming from an emotional place, from a fear-based place. We're not necessarily present at that moment. And again, do I think it's hard to do when you have littles? Absolutely. But keep it in mind and just practice it where you can. Practice it where it feels like it would work and where it would help you. Certainly, there are times we have to react fast. It's impossible, right? Your child's about to fall down. They're about to open up a door to stairs, and you're like, oh, I got to get in there and stop them. That's all fair. But essentially, what I'm getting at is like the process of slowing down in all other aspects of your life, including decision making, what feels right to you, feeling in or out of balance, finding that happy medium where you can kind of sit in the middle and be like, okay, this feels like a good place. I'm not too busy, but I'm not doing enough. I'm not checked out, right? Slowing down creates that space for us to be able to do those things. All right, next piece of advice. This one really wasn't advice, but I'm going to kind of loop it in to somewhat parenting advice, but again, life advice. I recently had Dr. Shafali on the podcast. She's the author of Conscious Parent and so many other amazing books, and she's really incredible. If you haven't listened to that episode, I'll link it in the show notes. She's really one of the first people whose parenting work I read and was completely blown away. Like I was like, oh my gosh, somebody is saying the thing that I think intuitively I had been doing, but didn't really have the structure or the language to support the ideas. But I intuitively had understood that my kids and my connection to them and my husband's connection to them is really a spiritual process, and that I learn from them and they learn from me. They're my mirrors and I'm theirs, right? And so the things that come up in them and the triggers that arise in me need to really be examined and looked at and not just set aside, that this is a really deliberate opportunity and journey for us to explore and learn ourselves as parents and not just be a caretaker, in the sense that like solve all of their problems and do all the things. Like, yes, we certainly need to be there for our children. It certainly is a sacrifice, but at the same time, it really is single-handedly the one relationship that I think you can glean the most about yourself. You can unlock the most potential within yourself. It's amazing and incredible to actually be a parent and to walk through that process. But Dr. Shafali really shined a light on all of that thinking for me and the idea of that. So when I got to have her on the podcast, it was such an incredible honor. And so as we were talking, I brought up this idea of tantrums, and I said to her, that's certainly a pain point with a lot of the families that I coach and a lot of the families that I work with. And I'm just curious to know, how do you walk a parent through that from a clinical perspective? What are some of the things that you talk about? So anyways, you can go back and listen. It's a longer answer than what I'm going to kind of summarize here. But what she said blew me away about empathy. So she said this to me: empathy. And she described it as like, it's really important that we express empathy to our children in those moments, despite feeling rattled as a parent. And empathy is the ability to sit with another, allow them to express the feeling or their emotion without the desire to change it. That last part, without the desire to change it, was mind-blowing. And think of how applicable that is to so many relationships, not just your kids. But first, let's look at it under the context of parenting. Your child's really crying about something. They're really, really upset about something. We so desperately, what do we want to do? We want to change that they feel that way. We want to fix it. We want to stop it. We want them to calm down. We want the emotion to change. We don't want it to stay that way. And that is not going to help our children become emotionally evolved people. They're not going to learn how to process. They're not going to learn how to metabolize their emotions. We're a generation of people that can't do that, quite frankly, right? I coach so many on the idea of regulating yourself, this idea of emotional regulation and awareness around yourself as the parent, so that you can then connect and attune to your child's needs. So it's really, really critical that we can practice empathy in that way. And again, not just with our children. Think of this with your loved ones, particularly your partners. Think of how many times your partner might be expressing something to you, and your desire is to change the way they feel about it. It's really, really, really powerful when we can stop and sit with it, even though we might not agree, even though we might be like, gosh, you're so far off about this. But that's our opinion. That's our perception. That's our way of looking at it. But we can hold space for the other, and we can simply allow. And we don't have to fix, we don't have to change. We can simply be. When I think of the people in my life who have provided me the greatest deal of comfort and have allowed me to sort of really express myself in a way that feels safe, it's the people who don't try to change how I feel. They're just there for me. They're just listening to me. They're just holding space for me. They're not correcting me. They're not telling me to consider it in a new way, not at least right away. In the moment when I'm upset, in the moment if I'm sad or angry or frustrated, whatever it is, they're just there taking it in. And certainly solutions are there, right? But we can get to that later. But think of the value and the power and how validating it is when you can be held by somebody, supported by somebody whose goal is not to change the way you're feeling in that moment. They're just allowing you to express it. So think of that, the context of your life, and also in the context of, parenting, and when your child's expressing an emotion that just feels so challenging, right? And this is fair for older kids too. Even if you have adult children, they're going to experience their first breakup, their first moment of loss. They're going to experience letdowns. They're going to experience friendship struggles, right? There's so many things that we desperately want to go in there and fix and change. And the truth is, we just really can't. So it's so, so, so hard. But just really sit with that and really think about where it shows up for you and where that fix it self comes out to try to just correct it and change it. And can you exercise something a little differently? Can you just think of it a little differently and lean into this idea? And my third piece of advice, I loved it so much. I was listening to my girl, Elise Lunin, on Pulling the Thread podcast. She was interviewing Nicole. I think Avant is how you pronounce her last name. And anyways, she has a really incredible background. I'll link that episode also in my show notes so you can listen to it. And it's not specifically about parenting, but again, I've said this multiple times, to be a better parent means you just have to be a better person. There has to just be a commitment to growing yourself, learning, becoming more things. It isn't about staying stagnant and kind of tethered to the description of what it means to parent. You're growing always. And so as I'm listening to this podcast, Elise is asking her about her upbringing and her parents, who both were very sort of magnetic individuals and really amazing and did wonderful things in their community. And she sort of was asking her like what that looked like from a parenting perspective. And Nicole answered her and she said, my parents used to intentionally put me in situations or in activities that made me slightly uncomfortable. Like it wasn't the first choice activity. It was something that I was like, I don't really know that I want to participate in this. And she said they would have her do it. And the deal was she had to try. And she didn't have to do it forever. This wasn't like this huge commitment, but she had to at least try. And her reason, and the parents' reason behind it, was because the real way that we learn about ourselves, our deep selves, our true selves, our authentic self, is really in struggle. And it's so hard to think of it that way, but it's when we sort of parse out what don't we like to really better understand, well, what do we like? And how do I behave in moments when things feel uncomfortable? Can I tolerate it? Can I sit with discomfort? And if so, what does it teach me? When we are in uncomfortable moments or things that just don't feel familiar and safe to us, that's typically when we start to gain things like resilience. We get better at being flexible. We get better at having more perspective. We learn other people's stories. We start to remain open. So her parents would purposely put her in situations where it just felt a little bit uncomfortable, and they'd have her try. And some things she walked away loving and some things she didn't. But she learned so much about herself and gained so much in the process that now as an adult, she's doing incredible things. It's unbelievable. And I thought about this for myself. I am a creature of habit. I love routine. I love safety and security, even though I think it's a fallacy. I try to control all the time so that I can feel safe and secure. And essentially, what she's really good at as a result of some of the things her parents did is she's really good at sitting in uncertainty and watching where it takes her. She's really good at self-trust. She's really good at knowing that even if a moment is an unknown or there is no way of really controlling the outcome, she knows that she has what it takes to work through it. So that's what uncomfortable moments can do for us. And if I'm being totally honest, as a parent, I don't know that I wholeheartedly stuck my kids in situations that I would have felt they didn't like or they weren't comfortable with. I think my knee-jerk reaction would have been to not do it because it's so uncomfortable for myself. That's one of those things I was mentioning earlier, right? We mirror for our kids what we struggle with ourselves. So if you run anxious, let's say as an adult, and you lean that way, it isn't unlikely that your child's going to also experience some anxiousness as well, right? They learn from what they see, what they feel, what they sense, so much more than what they see and hear. So next time something comes up and you know that it's just going to be a little bit uncomfortable, and your knee-jerk reaction is to say, I'm not going to have my kid do that. I know they're not going to like it. I want you to just sit and think about, but what would the gain be? What could they really learn about themselves? And simultaneously, next time you are in a situation where you are presented with an opportunity that feels a little uncomfortable, a little outside of your safe zone, think about saying yes. Just lean into it. For me, I would say the last 3 years, I have done this. And I will tell you this, had I not said yes to discomfort, I would have never started the Parenting Reframe, which used to be Kiddos and Insights. I would have never written my first article that got picked up by a major publication. I would have never written for Medium. Medium then went on to take my one article that I wrote about the idea of maybe I'm wrong, such a simple concept, and that's what the whole article is about. They named it one of the top articles, got picked up by the editors, and I still make money from that article. And that was probably 3 years ago or 4 years ago. Had I not leaned into discomfort, had I not said yes to the thing that makes me, just a little bit scared, a little bit uneasy, I would have never gone on TikTok, never. But I did because a friend said to me, you need to be on TikTok. You need to teach on TikTok. You need to be making videos. And I thought, okay, I'll try. And because I went into that feeling of like, I'm going to face the resistance and sit with it, and I'm going to just see what comes up. Look at what I've been able to do, not me, but all of us. It grew. This is now my full-time job. I get to be with you guys. I get to coach. I get to create courses. I get to write. I'm currently working on writing my first book. All of that happened because I simply leaned into what felt a little bit uncomfortable. I said yes to being a little bit unsafe, and ultimately saying, I think I can at least trust myself that if it doesn't go the way that I want, I'll manage whatever comes up. And every time I do this, a new door opens. Every time I do this, another blessing comes through. Every time I do this, I gain more lessons and more insights about myself. And this becomes the most amazing ride of my life. So I'll leave you with that from the deepest part of my heart. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. I absolutely love showing up in this way. And stay tuned because really cool things are happening in this space. And I will be saying yes to more things, more offerings, and more ways for us to connect. So until next time, thank you so much for listening.